Scripture reading, if you open your Bibles, is from John chapter 1. This occurs in the very eventful first chapter of John. John starts off with creation. He goes way, way back to find his idea of what the true genesis of Jesus is. And then you have quickly John the Baptist, and then you have Jesus going into the desert to be tested, and then all of a sudden Jesus starts gathering up disciples. It happens really quick in John. John's got a lot of ground to cover between the book of Genesis to what for him was present day. And so a lot of time passes in this first chapter of John, and Jesus one day decides to go to Galilee. We start at chapter 43. The next day Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Phillip, and he said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We found him about whom Moses in the law and the prophets wrote, Jesus, son of Joseph from Nazareth." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." When Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him, he said of him, "Here is truly an Israelite, in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael asked him, "Where did you get to know me?" Jesus answered, "I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you." Nathanael replied, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." And Jesus answered, "Do you believe that because I told you that I saw you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than these. Very truly I tell you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." The word of God for the people of God. Praise be to God. Let us pray. May the meditations of our hearts and the words of our mouths be acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. In being a disciple, we are by definition inviting others to come and see what being close to Jesus is all about. We're inviting others to see what the big deal is. So what are we showing them? Philip knew what he was showing Nathanael, and it probably exceeded all of his wildest dreams. Now, Philip is kind of a curious character, even though we don't know a whole lot about him from the Gospels. He is mentioned several times. He's there in the mix all the time. But he's often not the out front disciples like Peter, and often James and John. Philip also is kind of curious because Philip's not a Jewish name. And you might think in this era of really heightened ethnic sensitivities, people were battling between their tribes. You had the Greeks and you had the Romans, who were kind of the same thing in a lot of ways, even though they were culturally separate. And then you had the people from that area of the Near East. You had the different tribes of the Israelites. You had the Samaritans. And all of these were set against the Romans, even though they were occupied by them. But Philip is a Greek name. Philip grew up in a Jewish family. He was from Bethsaida. But he's got a Greek name. You can imagine maybe as Philip was being consecrated as a child, as he had his bar mitzvah there in the synagogue, or was first being brought forward as a small child as he was born. When he was named, the rabbi might have looked to the mom. "Really? Philip? Like there aren't any good names in your family? Philip?" Philip literally means lover of horses. He was a good Ocala guy. He would have fit right in here. But it still is a Greek name. Kind of curious. Now, Philip, as he grew up, became a very deliberate person. Maybe he was slightly more educated. Maybe he had a little bit more of a slightly more well-to-do upbringing. We're not really sure. But he was named after the ruler of his town, who built Bethsaida from a little tiny village into the provincial capital. He was named after a descendant, a relative of Herod, who was the ruler at that time. So maybe his family was employed somehow or connected with the governing authorities at that time. There might have been some sort of reason that his family decided, we're going to name our child after this ruler of our country. We know that Philip, even though he was martyred a short time after Jesus was, he quickly became one of the greatest preachers in Asia. He was martyred in West Turkey nowadays, a place called Hierapolis. Philip was somebody who desperately and deliberately cared about what people saw when they met Christ. He was somebody who was a very detail-oriented guy. And Philip saw a lot from Jesus. And he was often someone who could see even farther forward than that. Because he had this highly analytical mind, he could see forward. And like I mentioned before, when Jesus is feeding the 5,000, Philip uses his analytical vision and says, well, Jesus, 6 months' wages wouldn't buy enough food for all these people. What are you going to do? And we can easily, and I think wrongly, dismiss Philip as not having the faith to really see what Jesus might do. But Philip was someone who lived by that vision of details. And we need people like that in church. It's how we are able to see forward into our future and say, okay, will the income match the outgo, or do we have a problem? Philips are good to have around. And they're wonderful to speak into a moment and pronounce what is the picture that is actually there. And Philip saw his friend Nathaniel. And when he sees his friend Nathaniel, we know just how detail-oriented he was. Because if you look in verse 45, Philip finds Nathaniel and says, listen to this introduction to Jesus. Because it's not simply a rapturous, emotion-laden, come and see. There's a reason that Philip invites Nathaniel to come and see. He says, we have found him, about whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, son of Joseph from Nazareth. He gives 4 or 5 qualifiers to exactly why. See, he was worried about checking all the boxes. And his connection to Jesus was not simply an emotional one, because he was the Savior of the world. It wasn't simply a conviction that based on a feeling that would soon fade, like some of the other disciples. Philip, being the analytical person that he was, saw the boxes being checked before him. Nathaniel, not very analytical, simply asked the question, can anything good come out of Nazareth? I love Philip's response. He doesn't argue. Philip probably wasn't an arguer. He says, come and see the facts before you. Come and see. Just come on and see it. Who knows? It's also interesting because Jesus isn't calling Nathaniel. Philip is. Jesus isn't reaching out and calling. Philip goes out and finds a friend of his and says, come and see. I have found this. Come and see that which I have found. Now, we do learn later on that Jesus has already seen Nathaniel and has already commenced the whole process of calling a disciple before Philip even got there. But that gives Nathaniel a vision he needs. And Nathaniel replies, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. See, we all need to see things in a certain way. Sometimes our vision doesn't match up with somebody else's. We have different gifts. We have different spiritual tools that we use based on just the mental hardware that God has given us. We will all see things a little bit differently. Some of us will come to Jesus because he checks all the boxes, like Phillip. Some of us will come to Jesus because he checked most of the boxes, we think, and it just seems right. Some of us will come to Jesus because we feel we found a home in his love and in his arms. Some people will come to Jesus because we have been, as John Wesley always talked about, plucked like a brand from the burning. And we know and we have felt and we have personally and traumatically connected with the message of love and acceptance and grace that is there in the gospel of Christ. We may all get there a little differently. But there's one thing we can all see. We can all say. I just gave it away, Victoria. There's one thing we can all say to our friends, to people who, that they might say they're going to church with you this week, but, they backed out again. Oh, gosh, I just forgot that my kids had that soccer game. Oh, I just forgot that I had this other place to go. Man, once you know it, my kids called me from out of town. I got to go and see them. But really what we're doing is we're just inviting him to come and see. Come and see. Jesus might say to them, do you believe because I told you? Or did you believe because you saw? And oftentimes, we believe not when we're told to believe something, but we believe something when we see it. We believe something when we really see it. Now, if it doesn't match what we're told, we know the word for that, and we usually reject it. Most of us don't accept hypocrisy as a good thing. We believe what we see, what we know to be true. And we have a phrase for this we use all the time, right? Actions speak louder than words. We can preach at people all we want. We can tell them about Jesus all we want. But the most powerful invitation will probably be the words that Phillip spoke. Come and see. Come with me, in parentheses. Come and see. And then that should also encourage and challenge all of us to know that there are people coming to see what Jesus is all about at church every single morning, at every meal packing event that we do. There are people here to come and see what Jesus is all about. They're here to come and see, is this really a place that is covered in and just infused with God's grace? Is this a place where I'll feel loved and accepted and challenged to be a better person? Is this a place where even though I don't feel like I've ever been good enough, I know for a fact that God does? Come and see. Come and see. And we know Jesus' response. Jesus, if they see Jesus when they get here, Jesus will tell them, I'm paraphrasing that paragraph, by the way. He will tell them, oh, you believe because you saw that? You just wait. That's the great thing in this passage here. Jesus doesn't say, okay, great, I'm glad I checked those boxes off from you, so all right, let's keep walking. No, Jesus says, you believe because you saw that, but you just wait. Sometimes I think we make the gospel and church a little too small. But it's all about behaving right, or it's all about being the right way, or whatever. Jesus tells us, man, there's going to be some good stuff. You just wait. You think you believe because you saw this? You will see the Son of Man ascending and ascending. You will see angels. You will see heaven Lord, we are your disciples today. The folks learning from you, following you, listening to you. And by admitting that we live that life, we're inviting others to come and see what you're all about, just as Phillip did. And we may have come to you through many different ways. We may have a slightly different vision specifically about why we saw you and followed you. But when we invite others to come and see, Lord, what are we showing them? Are we showing them grace? Are we showing them your love and your joy? Are we showing them your all-abiding and ever-present love? Are we showing them the fierceness of the lengths you would go to redeem us from sin and death? Are we showing